Welcome to the Academy for Men's Tribal Fire Podcast. I'm Michael Gibson.
And I'm Lance Cole.
Yo, man, you ready to start a fire?
Yeah, let's light it up.
All right, so let's see here. Yeah, welcome to the podcast, Lance. I guess this is how we start, right?
That's how it starts.
The podcast has
like
begun.
that.
Yeah, we're live,
Yeah,
or we're recording anyway.
We're recording.
Yeah.
Okay,
And
cool.
you and I were just we were discussing, I guess, social media,
Yeah.
and the people that are in social media. You were commenting on, how these teachers and things like that and are out there now, and people are responding, and so
Yeah. Right.
take
The
it from
discussion.
there, man. Yeah.
It's specifically around that, the experience, right? So individual,
Sure.
talking about individual experience. And like as you go through life, and as you go through all the experiences that you go through, you learn things, you grow, you do this, you do that, you have all these different things, and people are at different levels of experience. Like one thing might work for somebody, and it might not work for somebody else, right?
Yeah.
And it's based on experience. It's like example would be music, right? Like listening to music. I like certain music. I kind of like all music because I grew up in it. But I like to listen to certain music, and other people don't like the same music. Like it doesn't move them the way it moves me.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
And then they might listen to music that I don't get moved by.
Yeah.
Right? But it's the same music. It's just the experience. It's my experience. So that
Right.
music is coming through my filter system, right?
Yep.
So this is really the only example I could come up with. When I was growing up, I didn't like country music. I didn't like jazz. I didn't like poppy type stuff, like pop
Yeah.
music.
Top
right?
40
like
pop, yeah.
top 40 pop type stuff. I do now.
You like country too?
I listen to country.
Are you out
I'm
on country?
out.
You're out
I'm
on
out.
country. Oh,
I'm
God.
out. And it might be because I grew up in it, and
Yeah.
I'm also a musician, and I was a musician for a long period
I mean,
of time
you're
in
an
my life.
accomplished drummer. I mean,
Sure.
Yeah. What are you laughing?
In the
it's
past,
true. Yeah.
in the past, I was an accomplished drummer.
Yeah.
I don't really play very much anymore. I do still have drums though, but I don't. They're not set up.
Well,
Anyway,
I can tell you this: I am an accomplished lip syncer.
awesome. Yes, you are. No,
So-
yeah, right. You are. Well, no, you're
I
an
could bust a
accomplished-
rime from time to time.
Accomplished karaoke person,
Sure.
which is not lip syncing.
No.
No.
that's
So
it.
there it is. Anyway, I learned to enjoy it, and I learned I like. It's not like in some cases I had to force myself, but when you're out in the world and other people are listening to things, or just over time,
Right.
like being exposed to things, I just learned how to like it.
Sure.
And the point I was getting is because I growing up in music, being a musician, I can appreciate the musicianship of the music, right?
Yeah.
So I can appreciate, especially the drums, because I'm a drummer. So listening to country music or listening to pop music and listening to what the musicians are doing is a different appreciation. So the music coming into my filter system now, I don't cringe. I don't go, oh, turn that off. I don't, so
Right.
experience, right?
Yeah.
Which is essentially what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Coming back around to social media and what people are sharing on social media, and it's about the responses and the language around the responses, right? So then we'll dive a little bit deeper into it. People are sharing, when I say people, I mean like the teachers, the people who people look up to
Yeah.
on social media, the ones who are doing workshops, the ones that are doing online programs,
Right.
the stuff that we do.
Some very powerful people, by the way, nowadays.
Very powerful people out there.
Yeah.
And that is also bringing about very powerful people responding to it, right?
Yeah.
And what I see in that is this, God, I don't feel like I processed this enough because it just hit me yesterday. But at the same time, what I see in that is language. There's almost a need for a different kind of language from the start, so from the original share of the person,
Yeah.
and then how it's being challenged or how it's being responded to.
Right.
Because what I see happening is, and I've noticed this like in the spiritual community, like with spiritual speak and things like that, like
Right.
those different things that people say around spiritual communities. And I get that it's a journey, and at the same time, that journey feels like it's coming to an end. Like there's this part where people are becoming more, people are needing more acceptance right out of the gate
Hmm.
for an inclusion of language, right? So if somebody, like I see somebody speaking certain things and teaching certain things about the feminine aspect or, toxic masculinity or toxic femininity, things
Right.
like that.
Right.
And it's so one-sided.
Yeah.
And it's responded to in the sense of the other side.
Oh,
So
yeah.
it's like both sides, like one person has this idea and then they put it out there and it's one-sided and talking about toxic masculinity, right?
Sure.
And then the other side comes in and starts bashing that and saying, you're leaving this out, you're leaving that out, you're leaving this out. And it's like,
When does it ever become a discussion instead of just an attack of positions?
yeah.
Like it's just positioning and attacking each other. Is that what you're getting at? Seems like that those are the responses that are coming across.
And this is, I feel like, yes, and it's bigger than that to me too. Like it's almost like, okay, what's dropping in? Like what happened to the Me Too movement? It's gone.
No, it's
happening. It's
no,
still out there.
It's just we're shielded from it, I think, in some ways, media wise.
Maybe Facebook started stopping people from posting about it. Maybe
Very much
maybe
so.
that's
The
what happened.
algorithms got changed, and so Me Too is not as prevalent in your face unless you're actually following a Me Too movement group or something like that.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay. So
Yeah.
I get that it's still happening. I'm
Yeah.
not saying it's not.
Yeah.
It's not as in the face as it was.
Yeah, that's true. There's not a Harvey Weinstein,
Sure.
demon.
Right.
And by the way, I'm not calling Harvey Weinstein a demon. Like
Yeah.
he was demonized unfairly. He is a piece of shit. Like I'll say that openly.
He was a poster boy.
Yeah, completely.
He was
But-
guilty, apparently.
Totally.
But he was a poster boy.
And there's not a current Harvey Weinstein right now that's driving the narrative.
Right.
I mean,
Yeah,
Jeffrey
he
Epstein.
killed himself.
No, that's Jeffrey Epstein.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
That's we happened to say that at the same time.
Jeffrey Epstein was murdered. I don't know what
Yeah.
happened to that guy, but I
Yeah,
don't think
sure.
whatever happened to him, okay, could happen to anyone else.
Of course.
Just put him in a cell with a big massive dude, and
Yeah.
he hangs himself. I mean,
Right.
maybe he didn't like the evening punishments.
Well, circling back around
Yeah.
though, I don't want to go off on all that stuff because who knows what the fuck is going on there.
I get it. The Me Too movement has literally taken on a new.
It's different.
Yeah.
And it's changed.
Yeah, it's modified.
And it's not out in forefront anymore. And the experience of it is different now.
Yeah.
And yeah, there's not a poster child for it anymore. There's nobody being attacked or called out
At the levels
at that level
yeah.
anymore.
Right.
I'm sure there's still people being called out. I'm
Oh,
sure
yeah.
there's going to continue to be people called out.
As far as I know, I mean, it became forgive me for saying it this way, but it morphed into a very effective way to ruin men's lives, like to call out men for shit that they did 10 years. Reed Mihalko is a perfect example of that. In fact, I'd love to have him on the podcast to discuss this. But Reed Mihalko did some things in the past. And this is not like, I'm not going, oh, well, it's okay because it was in the past. I'm saying in that culture, in that time, 10 years, 20 years ago, in the 50s, hey, sweetie, was not a Harvey Weinstein moment for women.
Right.
Hey, baby, was not a Harvey Weinstein. That was the culture of the time. And it was definitely, misogynistic. And when the Me Too movement happened, it happened out of necessity. And it has somewhat morphed into a way for women to, some women, not all women, for some women to exact revenge on a trauma that was perpetrated on them by a man.
Sure.
And so there's very little leeway here. It's almost like, well, you fucking did that 10 years, 12 years ago, and it affected me, and I'm putting you on blast. So now all of a sudden, men are on blast, and it's because the righteousness of the, quote unquote, the righteousness of the Me Too movement to protect and to heal women who have been impacted by this, right? Is like, that's the only thing that matters, not necessarily the rehabilitation of a man who may have done that 12 years ago, but today would never do anything like that, realizing 10, 12 years ago, that was a shitty way to be.
Right.
Right? Like, I'm not that fucking guy anymore. I can personally attest to this. Like, I'm sure women can come out and go, you were this and you were that in my, my clubbing days after my divorce.
Sure.
Oh, fuck, I hated women.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like, I was one of those guys
But you were at the club to pick one
up and to, fuck and abuse it however I could.
Right.
And I wasn't very good at it either. So, some women are luckier than others. My point is that we all have that. Like, men, we all have that, and we're being rehabilitated as we go. Like, this is happening right now. And what I think that in light of that, I know I'm on a tangent here, that in light of that, I think maybe we should start to apply grace to those men who go, yeah, I fucked up. I made some mistakes, and I harmed people, and I will never do that again. I'm going to do everything I can to be hyper vigilant against myself or another man doing that to a woman.
Yeah.
Like, that's the level of rehabilitation that I think the world wants and needs around the masculine, because there is such a thing as like toxic masculine. Yeah. And there's such a thing as toxic feminine. Yeah. And it's probably more realistic to say there are such things as toxic fucking humans.
Got it.
Human beings can just be shitty to each other, and it doesn't necessarily mean it's feminine or masculine. Yep. It's just people being shitty.
Agreed.
So,
yeah. There's that whole level.
Yeah. Well, and
it's
take it one step further, I think, because that's where you were going with it.
It's deeper. It's that, and it's more. So it's the experience of it all, and it's what we do with the experience and how we give it back. Like, how we give it back isn't the right words. How we express our inner experience, which I guess could be giving it back. Anyway, so it's like I read something,
mirror it back.
Yeah, like how we mirror it back to the world.
Right.
With whatever interaction that we're involved in, or wherever we are. Like, whether it's on social media and Facebook, and you're responding to something like that, it's like. So the big question that's popping into my brain is, does anybody listen anymore? Or are people just need to rebut or come out against whatever somebody else is saying? Like,
what are we really listening for, if we're listening at all?
The latter. Are we really listening at all? Like, I know I try and listen. Like, I read a post, or I'll read something about, like, I happen to be reading, where this all came from was toxic femininity, toxic masculinity, a post about that. And the rebuttal was like, it almost felt like a sideways attack. And I can't get into all the details of it. It's the energy of it. And that's really what I'm talking about, because the energy of it, it's my experience of the post, of the response. And it's my energy that I'm experiencing it through. Yeah. But I'm also interacting, right? So I am having an external stimulus come in, an external energy come in, and I'm responding to it based on my filter system. And my filter system is one I work towards listening, right? Yeah. Like, actively listening to what people are saying. Yeah. I have my moments. I work towards it on a continual basis.
So it's kind of like country music.
It's kind of like country music. Yeah. It's like
you got to work on listening to it.
You got to work on it. I had to fucking work on it.
Yeah.
I totally did. And I can only handle it for a period of time.
Right.
Because, some of the lyrics and stuff are bad. But anyway.
Well, this
Well, it's
ties,
all about like shame and loss and all this.
but this
you know,
ties directly into. I mean,
it's the
on
experience.
topic. It's like the experience of it
Yeah.
you're working through.
Yeah.
How does it fuck with you? Like how? In what way does, let's say, a post like that fuck with you?
I don't know that it fucks with me. It makes me question. It makes me question where people are at on their journeys in life and what they're really opening themselves to seeing, to taking in.
Mm-hmm.
It's like it's almost as though, like, I read posts. I don't read a lot of them.
Mm-hmm.
I try and recognize in the first few sentences if it's something that's even worth reading,
Right.
because I look for things to take in on forward-thinking topics, right? So,
Yeah.
like, what's next? Like, my big thing right now in my life with different things that I'm working on is what's next,
Right.
right? Like, what's happening now? How do we get the message that you and I are creating out into the world? How do we do that? What's next?
Yeah.
So I feel like that's in my energy, so I'm looking for that, and I'm not noticing it around me, but I can feel the tension in what I'm seeing
Right.
happening on social media.
So we're literally forwarding a conversation.
Sure.
Like that's so what's happening right now is what's called forwarding the conversation.
Yeah.
Right. So when you have this experience of, what looks like people being contrary,
Mm-hmm.
it almost seems like that's what happens. Like a friend of mine who I love posts things and they're so fucking contrary to what other people like are used to,
Yeah.
that the responses that come across are like, you're this misogynistic, like all these attacks
Right.
to what was said without having listened to what was said.
Right.
Like, even though it's a contrary notion.
Right.
And I think people are listening for what they agree with and what they don't agree with.
Filter system.
Exactly. It's like,
Yeah.
can I justify my own belief system based on what I just read on a Facebook post?
Right.
Like, you know what I mean? Like, or
Right.
or what's even, or take it one step further. I'm judging everything. I'm judging, is it right?
Mm-hmm.
Is it wrong?
Mm-hmm.
Do I already know this? Do I not know this?
Mm-hmm.
Like, we judge everything through that filter system.
Right.
And rather than just listening to what's being said, it becomes more of a, do I align? Do I not align? What's my 2 cents?
Right.
And oftentimes it's not a conversation. It's an attack on point of view.
Right.
Yeah.
And something that's coming to me on this is I just feel like there's so much fucking wasted space.
Yeah, man.
Like, so much wasted energy being put into these things simply because it appears through my filter system that people aren't really listening.
Yeah.
or hearing or taking in what's being spoken or what's being said, and just allowing it to exist, because it's like the person that's posting it is coming from their experience.
Sure.
So it's theirs.
Yeah.
Right? So it's their experience. Yeah, sure, agree, disagree, whatever. But don't just blah all over whatever the person is sharing. I mean, it's like I mean, essentially all the hate in the responses is, I mean, it's essentially shaming the person.
Yeah.
Because whatever they're posting about is their experience.
Yeah.
So it's like we go through, we've talked about this so many times, like going through life and trying to remove the guilt, shame, and fear from life so that we can live and so that we can have wonderful experiences and grow and connect, right?
Right.
And we do all those things, and then it's like from the comfort of our own home and our couch, we can type things and post voice messages that and we feel safe because we're in these walls,
Yeah.
right?
I'm
But
behind a
it's-
microphone.
Yeah, there's things that we would never say to somebody's face.
Yeah.
Like, you would never say these things out loud to somebody, but it's okay to type them.
Yeah.
You
and,
know?
and what you say, well, we are saying it if we're typing it, but it's social media has taken on a whole different world when it comes to sacred sexuality. And like, there are people that are saying things that are just fucking wrong. Like, I'm not going to jump on anybody. Like, that's not my point here. My point is that some people say things on social media that are just dead wrong, and
I got a great example.
you're going to get a chance to tell.
Yeah.
And who am I to tell you that your expression is wrong?
There's some that are out there that
where
need to
I
be
draw the line,
pointed.
though, where I
Yeah.
draw the line, though, is in the accuracy of reality and logic.
Right.
And I'm very, I'm rigorous when it comes to reality and logic.
Mhm.
And when people start this is the favorite thing I love to counter is the idea of the woo. Like, there's a
Right.
thing in tantra, there's a thing in sacred sexuality called the woo,
Yeah.
right?
You call it the woo.
I call it if everybody calls it woo, it's woo woo.
Woo woo.
People, when you go to something and you sit down and you do
Yeah.
the meditation
Yeah.
and you have an experience, that's woo woo.
Yeah.
Now here's how I reconcile that in my own mind. Here's how I check off and make sure that all the checks have been written and paid.
Yeah.
Okay. I understand woo as an experience.
Right.
I know it's an experience and it's subjective. So
Cool.
your woo
Totally.
experience
Yeah.
is completely subjective. I can't say to you that's bullshit, that's not really true,
Right.
blah blah blah, whatever.
Right.
I won't do that. Here's what I will do. I will say it's likely that the experience you had was driven by some hormone or peptide or something that actually entered the bloodstream.
Yeah.
And had you experienced this, including a DMT rush
Sure.
or whatever, and you had this woo experience, and then I go, and that's amazing. That's different from saying that shit isn't true.
Right.
No, your experience is exactly what you experienced. And I like to understand things.
Yeah.
So perhaps there's an explanation that's not woo.
There's definitely explanations that
Yeah.
aren't woo, but there's I see woo as exactly what you said
Mm-hmm.
and more.
Okay.
So there's more on top of the
Well,
physical chemical
right.
thing going on.
And see, and this is
Yeah.
where I disagree.
Right. Right.
I think it's all chemical and all that
I get
stuff.
it. I totally get it. So I love it.
This is
I
why
don't
you and
wanna-
I are so good at
I
this.
I don't want to go down that
No,
road.
no,
right
no.
now.
It's great.
But it's a great example
Yeah.
of what you're saying. It's about experience. It's about the experience of what's happening for the other person and
Right.
actually listening to them. And even in your answer or your response, right?
Yeah.
It's still. I would add a little more acknowledgement language to
Yeah.
it.
The experience
You know
is
what I mean?
valid.
Thank
oh my
you.
God.
Yes,
that's what I try to get at.
that.
That's the whole point of what I
Yeah.
say when I say it. It's okay, you had this experience of woo. Here's possibly what happened, but it was a valid experience.
Totally.
People that say they experience God,
Yeah.
okay, although
Same
there's
fucking thing.
although there's literally
Yeah.
no evidence
Yeah.
that
The cathartic
that
experience
a God
or whatever.
exists.
Yeah, sure.
there's no evidence that it, and people will argue with me about that, but it's true. But the experience you had is real.
Yeah.
Now, did a God do it? I don't know, but the experience you had, I can't say it, and it's a valid experience.
Right.
And if you look a little deeper and you find out that maybe some things happened, you can better explain the experience and still appreciate the experience.
Sure.
Just that simple.
What do I want to say here? I want to say this, and I've felt this way for a long time.
Yeah.
Everything that I've experienced energetically
Mhm.
or in the woo
Yeah.
will eventually be proven scientifically. Period.
Likely.
Likely.
Yeah.
Yes, it will.
And the
It
question
totally
is,
will.
and the question is, are you willing to have your woo be explained scientifically, even if the woo doesn't come up with the
Well, you just move on to the next woo.
the current determined explanation of, for instance.
Say that again.
All right. Are you willing to accept the scientific explanation
Of course.
of the woo experience, even if the explanation does not support woo?
Of course.
Okay, that's it.
Well, but see,
And by the way, I'm willing to accept the reverse of that.
Yeah, of course.
If the science says it's woo,
yeah.
this was a spiritual experience, and we can now detect and determine, and this is what happened, that it's actually spiritual, then I will accept that.
Okay, so let's dive into that, because this is on
Go.
This is on it's on point with
Ready, set,
go. It's on point with this whole what I'm talking about, experience and response to experience. Right. So you have a woo experience, and
I've had many.
You have a response to it.
Right.
So you have a belief structure around what it is, and that's your experience of it. So I agree with you, right? And I understand chemicals in the body. I understand a little bit about physiology and what the body does and what the different glands do and all these different things. And I get that we create our own chemicals to give us experiences, and I also get that we have plant experiences and manufactured chemical experiences from drugs and things
You
like
can
that.
introduce all kinds of different elements and chemicals into the system.
Right.
Yeah.
Which
changes the experience.
Are there to give you quote unquote woo experiences.
Yes.
Right?
Right.
So
an experience of consciousness that opens up things, and there's the neurology and the way that we're mapped and all these other things that happen when you do these other plant medicines and everything. And what I'm interested in, I'm sorry to cut you off. What I'm so interested in is, how do I reproduce it? So this is why I look at,
what do you mean reproduce?
The experience.
Like without going back to the plant medicine or whatever the drug was?
No, including the plant medicine. No, what I'm saying is, when I have a woo experience, like, I want to understand the underlying reason behind it. I'll give you an example. When I was a Christian, I was a born-again Christian, we used to do this thing called worship. It's at the beginning of the service. You do about 20 or 30 minutes of worship. And in my church, we were tongue talkers. Like, we were talking in tongues and all that stuff. And
awesome.
It's basically
gibberish.
Osho's gibberish, right?
Yeah, sure.
So Osho, by the way, so for all you Christians, I want you to know that people who are not even religious do speaking in tongues. And
we just call it gibberish.
It's called gibberish. And Osho did it. And it's done in Eastern,
it's cathartic.
In India and other places. It's the practice of just speaking, saying without words. Like, all it is just that. It's gibberish. Yeah. Well, listen, I had many experiences while I was church going, and I was a believer, quote unquote, a believer, where I felt what I would consider to be a spiritual experience, or the Holy Ghost is what they called it, the Holy Ghost. Okay. And at that time,
sorry, I had to.
Casper the Holy Ghost. Boo. You're just evil. I love you, bro.
My dad's rolling in his grave right now. Sorry, Dad. I love you.
Let's not go there. Okay, so I had this experience of the Holy Ghost.
Yeah.
At the time, I really was convinced that I was interacting with a deity. I was so convinced. I could speak in tongues. We would worship. It would be so, like, all this was going on.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then, after my deconversion, I started looking at the science of it, and I realized that I could reproduce that experience, and I actually have reproduced it many, many times. I did it in ISTA. I've done it at Bliss. I've done it in my own life, just in my own practice here in front of my mirrors, where I would raise my hands. I would sing songs, just like you said. I would do gibberish, all of it, and I would have the experience of, like, the Holy Ghost being in my space. Sure. Now, was that the Holy Ghost? Was it some kind of spiritual thing? I think not. I think what I've done is I've figured out the mechanism for producing or reproducing that experience.
Right.
It's woo. It feels woo, but I can reproduce it. That's what I mean. I want to be able to understand it to reproduce it, because I really enjoy the experience. It unleashes my creativity. It opens my heart. Oxytocin gets delivered to my system. All of those things are happening in that moment when you're doing what you would consider worshiping the Lord.
Got it.
In a completely non-Lord required moment. Yeah. In other words, I'm just doing the activity, but it's not towards anything or towards anyone. So that's what I mean by reproduce it.
Yeah. Got it.
Yeah.
Got it.
So I think if we can do that, if we can find out like this really feels good, this has merit in my life, it's a spiritual experience or whatever you want to call it, you can actually reproduce it over and over and over again, and you can teach others to do the same.
Yeah.
Why not?
I agree with you.
It feels great.
I agree with you.
It's a valid experience.
So
And people
these
get
things-
downloads from this.
Of course.
You know, like they're like connected to whatever the consciousness is, and it's all about consciousness.
Right. But the consciousness that you're just speaking of is woo.
Well, I mean, yeah, I can achieve woo.
I'm poking.
I can
Sorry.
achieve woo.
There's
I'm
so
a woo achiever.
woo, spiritual experience, all of those things, like all of that stuff
You're
that
just
you're
poking
talking
at me
about.
now?
I am.
That's just-
I had to poke at
You're
you.
funny.
So,
Love you, bro.
I love you too. They're all spiritual experiences,
Yeah.
and they can all be. You know, you can call it a spiritual experience,
Sure.
or you can call it a chemical experience.
Yeah.
Self-induced chemical experience, or you can call it, hey, I took ayahuasca experience.
Yeah.
They're all the same, but they can all be classified as woo and spiritual and all this different stuff, or cathartic, or whatever the fuck you want to call it.
Yeah.
And it all overlaps.
Mhm.
But the experience is yours, like what you went through in that moment. Like
Yep.
anyone can have a cathartic or spiritual experience. Let's call it spiritual experience. Everyone can,
Mhm.
right? If they choose to.
Yeah.
Whether it's external stimulus, or whether it's self-induced, like the one you just described,
Mhm.
right? Like through dancing, doing gibberish, doing different things, right? And I love that. You used to do gibberish in church,
Oh yeah.
and then during one of the programs, ecstasy that I teach, we do gibberish.
Yeah.
And
Exactly.
It's a spiritual experience for every single person. and
It doesn't matter if you have a God
hilarious.
involved or not, man.
Yeah,
You
there
know?
is no God involved. It's yourself.
Yeah.
right?
Well, your intention or whoever
Yeah.
you're focusing on, whatever.
Right.
You don't need a God for
Yeah.
this.
The way that it goes for me is it's about you. It's
Yeah.
about the individual, whoever's
Yeah.
doing having the experience. They're there to be in the experience for themselves, to see what can come up,
Yep.
which is what you were just describing.
Yeah.
And you're trying to repeat that and recreate it, which is awesome.
You're lowering the pail deep into the well
Yeah,
and then pulling it back up.
yeah, that's it.
That's what's up.
That's it. But we fucking tangents we go on sometimes.
It's good life, isn't it?
About it, like I want to try and circle this back around to experience and what I like and what I notice going on in social media and in the world.
Yeah.
Like I get that we need people to be sharing everything. I get that we need people to get these downloads and put them out into the world,
Mhm.
right?
Yep.
Like to have that spiritual experience and go through. And oh shit, no, I want to backtrack. I
Go
just remembered the example I was going to say
Go ahead.
of something that needs to be like called out. Like we were talking about the woo experiences and the misperceptions of things.
Mhm.
I was browsing it's a page on Facebook, and it's a worldwide tantra group.
Okay.
I think it's just called Tantra, actually. It might be something else, but I don't know.
Do you know who runs it?
No, I have no
Okay.
clue.
Is it Facebook or is it?
It's on
somewhere?
Facebook.
Tantra Wisdom.
It might be Tantra Wisdom, but I think this one is different. I think it's just actually Tantra.
Okay.
Might be. I don't know.
All right.
Anyway, somebody posted this. They had this picture
Mhm.
of a man, and he's sitting in front of a fire, and he's got a skull next to him, and he's painted like he's ashy, like he looks like he's an ash, and he's got colors, and
Right.
he's like in his whatever garb, right?
Yeah.
He's a very tribal
Sure.
looking photograph, but he's got a human skull next to him. And then there was this like paragraph about tantra and about spirituality and about like things being true and all this other, whatever the fuck it was about.
Right.
The fucking picture was of a guy from somewhere in Asia, and he belongs to a cannibalistic tribe that hunts and kills human beings and eats them.
Yeah.
And this person saw this picture on the internet
Yeah.
and grabbed it and thought it was tantric because he was sitting in front of a fire with a skull, and he looked ashy and tribally.
Yeah.
So they posted it like this, like beautiful thing.
This is what Tantra is.
What the fuck?
I know.
What the fuck?
Right, yeah. Yeah.
Anyway, that needs to be called out.
Yeah.
It
I
got
agree.
called out. Anyway,
I thank you for saying that, because I mean,
fuck me. It's
well,
just-
this is like what we were talking about. Like, some people just say things that are just plain wrong.
right.
You know,
That was yes. This is the example.
filter
Going back
that
to
shit out, man.
So, and this is where you get back into the experience piece,
Mm-hmm.
and specifically in social media, where it's like, what is being said, what's being listened to,
Yeah.
and where the fuck did discernment go, and how are you getting your information,
Yeah.
and even if you do get some information, are you really fucking listening to it?
Yeah.
Like, what is it about life? Like, what are you stepping into in life?
Right.
Like, what the fuck is next? Right?
Yeah.
Like, how do you do this? What do we do with it? What's the message? What's the thing, like what's the thing that pulls, this elusive universal love back in, like what are the moves to do that? Like, what are the moves to acceptance? What are the, love is chemical.
Yeah. Oxytocin.
Acceptance
Yeah.
is not chemical.
Yeah. Acceptance has chemicals.
It has chemicals, but it's not.
Yeah.
Love is chemical, like that feeling that you get. That I was having a conversation with a friend last night about. She's in new relationship energy,
Yeah.
and it's like, okay, well, I get it. I totally understand it. I've been there,
Yeah.
and it crashes, like it goes away. So it's like, how do you, and what do you do then? Like, what do you do? How do you bring that universal love in?
Right.
What's the next thing?
How do you keep
What's
love
the
there?
acceptance? How do you keep the love there? How do you keep that chemical mixture going? Or it's going to spike,
Mm-hmm.
but then how do you maintain it? How do you level it out? It's like taking off in a plane. You take off and you level out at a certain altitude, and then you hang there, and then maybe you go down a little bit, and then you go back up.
Yeah.
It's all the experience.
question.
The experience of it.
Well,
It's the experience of life. The
I
experience.
wish I had
of-
answers. I don't.
I don't have the answers either.
Well, I
These
know
are
this.
Posing this.
Actually, I know this. I do have an answer. I have an answer. It's not the answer,
Awesome.
but I have an answer, and that is, and I base it on what we know psychologically about people who are constant stressors. Right? They're constantly in stress.
Sure.
Right? People who can consistently attract drama into their life, like they are addicted to cortisol.
Sure.
They're addicted to adrenaline. Their adrenals end up being shot over time. They're negative people to be with.
Yeah.
It's that. And I think the same thing is true of people who have love in their lives, who are always positive, who are up.
Yeah.
They have a different chemical addiction. And that chemical addiction would be more along the lines of oxytocin, serotonin,
Yeah.
focused mainly on those two.
Sure.
And then dopamine from time to time.
Yeah.
Dopamine is one of those things that, if you're not careful, can turn you into a fucking addict.
Yeah. Totally.
It is the addictive hormone in our bodies that, so be careful with that. But dopamine is the one that keeps you going to your phone to play that game when you're bored.
Right. Drip. Drip.
That's your drip.
Yeah.
Right. So you're playing the whatever,
Bored or avoiding.
or you're doing this on your Instagram, and you're getting likes. Each like is a dopamine push.
Right.
Anyway, how do you get away from that? Well, I think there are certain things that we can do as humans, knowing that we have this system in place until we transcend it.
Right.
And that is to do things that constantly keep us in a state of homeostasis.
Yeah.
And homeostasis is achieved by a bunch of different things: the way we eat, the exercise we have, the people in our lives, allowing positive expression, experiences that bolster, right? That don't dig underneath you and you drop in.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And we can train other people how we want to be treated.
Sure.
We train others to treat us a certain way. And by allowing them, if they treat us poorly, allowing that kind of behavior to go unchallenged,
Yeah.
will then begin to produce cortisol. And then all of a sudden, after a period of time, you no longer want to be around those people. This is
Right.
what we call growing apart.
Right.
Right? I don't need that in my life anymore.
I know it well.
But then there are people in your life who, even this is so powerful. Even if you've been away from each other for years and you two have